Hello, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. My name's Mouse,
And I'm Hayate.
and together we're the hosts of Swan Shootout Radio, which is a radio show or podcast focused on discussing niche Japanese video games. And today's a special episode because we have a guest with us today. He's best known as a Tony Hawk speedrunner, but he's also into Japanese games and especially Famicom games, I think. GeorgeThePlushie is with us. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, thanks for having me on.
Thanks.
So I think a lot of people who have seen your Tony Hawk videos might not realize that you're also so much into Famicom and other games. Is it mostly just Famicom that you play?
Yeah, it's mostly Famicom stuff, although I've got a decent Super Famicom collection and really haven't branched out farther from that.
That's cool.
Yeah. I'm kind of the same. Like I think like 80% of my collection is just Famicom, Super Famicom. And today we're going to be going into a series that all three of us are pretty intimately familiar with because we've speedrun the game that we're focusing on, The Quest of Kai. So I think this will be a pretty interesting discussion today. But before we get into that, we have a little segment that we do where we briefly talk about some games that we've been playing recently. And for me, I've mostly been playing Beautiful Katamari on the Xbox 360, which was an Xbox 360 exclusive game, and one of several Xbox 360 exclusives that Namco released in the late 2000s. They were, oddly enough, one of the bigger supporters of the console around that time, which may have been partly because Microsoft was sending them a lot of money to reserve that exclusivity. But this is another Katamari game, and there's not really much more to say about it other than that. Like you roll stuff up, has really good music, but it doesn't really shake up the formula of the series. And there's nothing wrong with that per se, because I really enjoy Katamari games, but at the same time, I think there's a lot of the appeal of the series is just the novelty of rolling things up. And like there is skill involved in doing that quickly, but it's not like Super Monkey Ball levels of skill. So like if you have an Xbox 360, this is a game worth playing, but at the same time, I think if you've played other Katamari games, you're not really missing much.
Yeah, that's interesting to me since I really like the PS2 games, but I had a bit of a sour experience with the PS Vita game, Touch My Katamari. So I will be interested in checking out the Xbox game if it is as good as you say.
Yeah, like it there's nothing wrong with it. It's just it's more of the same thing that you got on the PS2, I think.
Well, for me, it has been a pretty slow week. I've been mostly just reading a visual novel called Oretashi no Tsubasa wa Nai, which is a pretty fitting game to play during this December season. And there's nothing much substantial I can say, as I've been reading it pretty slowly, but it is really, really good with some pretty incredible, full of personality dialogue. So I really recommend it. And outside of that, I've just been playing fighting games with friends, mostly Guilty Gear Plus R and Melty Blood, and nothing much outside of that.
What about you, George?
I've been playing a little bit of Celeste. I'm just basically finally getting to it. And I've kind of worked my way through pretty much everything except the final chapter that came out pretty recently. I haven't attempted any of the C sides yet, but I've done all the B sides and all that. I don't know. It's pretty fun. It's like a challenging platformer, and it kind of worked out that it really kind of reminds me a lot. Kind of like the concept of just this small little screens that you have to work your way through as far as like, platformer, where it kind of reminds me a little bit of Quest of Kai.
Yeah, it's not the kind of games that I usually play, but I do have some interest in checking out the platforming in that game.
Yeah.
That seems like a game that the speedrun community really latched onto.
Yeah.
That's true.
Other than that, not a whole lot.
All right.
Mm-hmm.
Well, not to waste any time, let's get talking about the Tower of Druaga series, or as it's also known, the Babylonian Castle Saga.
Oh, yeah.
And this was a series that started on the arcade back in 1984. It was designed, the lead designer was Masanobu Endo, who had previously made a name for himself as the lead designer of Xevious, which was a scrolling shooter and one of Namco's biggest arcade hits back in the 80s. And for this game, the Tower of Druaga, I think what's interesting about the series, or at least one of the interesting points, is how it experimented with a number of different genres over each title. The first of which being a top-down action RPG sort of game on the arcade. So you play as Gil, who's a knight going to rescue the priestess Kai in a tower with 60 floors. And you have a sword and shield. Your shield is able to block magic attacks that are shot by enemies. And if you draw your sword, then your shield moves over to the side, and you can fight monsters in the tower. And I think the main core concept that holds this game together is that you have to pick up different items as you explore through the tower, one floor at a time. And to get these items, you have to fulfill a condition on each floor. And these conditions can be very obscure and random. Some of them are just like kill 2 slimes. Some of them are like walk to the top of the floor and spin around 3 times and block a magic attack and do all these like random actions.
This was pretty important since it kind of became a pioneer in the custom of sharing notes between players to let others know what kind of treasures will be in each floor and how to progress through the game.
Yeah. There were whole like notebooks full of secrets and shared information at arcades. That this game was really one of the pioneers in getting people to share information and work together to figure out a game.
And it became very influential on other top-down action adventure games like The Legend of Zelda, which had a similar focus on sharing secrets with your friends.
It's also pretty influential on Dragon Slayer from Falcom and Highlight, if that's how it's pronounced.
Yeah.
It's interesting that it influenced so many top-down action RPGs, since the game was modeled after a Mappy board, which is a vertical maze game from Namco. So you can kind of see the vertical aspect, even if it's a top-down game.
The character designer for this game was Yuichiro Shinozaki, also known as Yu Shino, and he was the character designer not only for the Tower of Druaga, but also the other main series Druaga games. And if you look on his Twitter, which is at Shino4No, SHINO number 4 KNOW, he's always posting old concept art from Druaga and the following games in this series. And he's very active in responding to people in the Druaga community on Twitter. So if you're interested in some of that artwork, I highly recommend checking it out. The second game in this series, released in 1986, was The Return of Ishtar, which was a top-down co-op action game. You could play as either Gil or Kai with a friend, and you sort of walk around the tower fighting monsters. It's a direct sequel to the Tower of Druaga. So at the end of that game, you reach the 60th floor of the tower, and in The Return of Ishtar, you start there and make your way out one floor at a time, basically.
Right.
I have never played this game, but I've seen it on Game Center CX,
Oh yeah.
and I'm not really sure, but I think this game, even more than Druaga and Quest of Kai, even those are pretty good games, I think this one has a more Kusoge reputation among the.
Kusoge?
Yeah, I think more than those two, this has more of that kind of reputation among regular players.
Mm-hmm. I think for a lot of the games in the series, they're not the most appealing to the casual player who just picks them up, because like in the case of Tower of Druaga, you really need to know how to play the game, and you need a lot of arcane information just to get through it. And in the Quest of Kai, there's a very unusual control scheme.
Yeah, I don't really agree with that, but like calling those games Kusoge, but it is something you see, but it is something you see from people.
Some people call the Tower of Druaga a Tsurumege, or it's literally a squid game, and the meaning behind that is that squid is something that you have to chew on it a lot before it starts tasting good. And with these games, you kind of need to play them a lot in order to actually appreciate what they're going for, which may have been sort of the curse of the series, but also it has developed a very dedicated small fan base because of that. So the third game was the Quest of Kai, which I think we should skip over for the time being, because we're going to talk about it more in depth. And the fourth and final game in the main series, the last one, which was had lead development by Masanobu Endo, was the Blue Crystal Rod, also known as the Destiny of Gilgamesh, released in 1994 on the Super Famicom. And this was a pretty dramatic shift in the series in terms of genre, because it's like a pure adventure game where you just go around to different locations in first-person perspective. And as you visit different locations in the world, there will be different events that play out, and these will branch the story in various directions. And there are 48 different endings to the game, depending on the order that you visit places and the things that you do there. And they can be pretty dramatically different. A single playthrough is only about 30 minutes long, so you can play through this like multiple times, even in a single sitting. And I think the appeal of it, more so than the other games, is just kind of experiencing the world and the characters of Druaga and getting a different experience with each playthrough as you try different things. And it has some very nice pixel art.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. After that, the series kind of went dormant for a time, until the early 2000s, where it had a small revival. And there was the Game Boy Color game. There was a PS2 game, which was part of the Fushigi no Dungeon series.
Oh yeah.
Which is pretty good, although it's a different sort of appeal than some of the other Fushigi no Dungeon games. It's kind of neat in how on each floor the dungeons aren't actually random, although the loot is random, and it goes back to the original arcade Tower of Druaga system, where there's a condition for spawning a chest on each floor, and those chests will contain a really good item. So as you play, you kind of figure out those chest conditions. They also had an arcade online co-op game. There was an MMO. There was a mobile phone game. But none of these were like super popular, and the main series was really in the 80s and the early 90s.
Oh, come on, you gotta talk about the anime.
Oh yeah, have you seen the anime?
I watched it all the way through, although I can't say I was a big fan of it, but yeah.
Mm-hmm. To me, it looked like more of a spin-off than an actual.
Not really related.
Yeah.
I mean, it kind of is, because like Gills like shows up or whatever, and Kai is in there too, but it's not really like, I don't even know if you would call it canon.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So with that, I think we should center back on the Quest of Kai, which is sort of the game that most of us have, that all of us have played the most of.
Mm-hmm.
For me, I've played like well over 100 hours of this, and it's a platform game which originally was not actually supposed to be part of the Druaga series, because it's like a straight up clone or ripoff of an older arcade game from Atari called Major Havoc. And according to Masanobu Endo, who he used to participate on Ni Channel a lot, Japanese message board, and he was always like giving information about development of games that he worked on, so much that Nishimura gave him a unique handle so that people could recognize him when he posted. And some of those posts were archived on a fan site called Druaga.to. And one of the things that he wrote about the Quest of Kai was that originally this game started as Minor Havoc, which was supposed to be like a sequel to Major Havoc. And they got as far as making a prototype of it, but they decided that it wasn't going to be easy to market this to the Japanese audience. So instead they sort of reskinned it into a Quest of Kai game, or a Druaga game with Kai. So George, have you played much of Major Havoc?
I've played just a little bit to really, get a good feel for it. But yeah, I mean, talk about like a weird story, because you have this obscure 1983 arcade game, and they take just the platforming elements, because the game it's like a, kind of like a Galaxian kind of game, and then there's also parts where you're navigating through like little obstacle courses in your spaceship, and then the actual platforming parts, which is what Quest of Kai is really based off of. You go into like a little base, new platform. You have to dodge monsters or aliens, I guess, and obstacles, and reach some sort. I can't, off the top of my head, I can't remember what it is, but you have to reach something, or you have to plant a bomb, I think, and then make your way back out. And then
it's sort of a weird game, since
it really is.
It's weird since it flips between different genres back and forth. Like you have the scrolling shooting section, and then you have the platforming section, and it uses vector graphics rather than pixel, so it manages to transition between those in a pretty cool 3D kind of way. But for the Quest of Kai, they just ripped off the platforming part, and what's really unique about both of these games is the controls and the physics, which are a lot different than the average platforming game. The main key point being that you can hold down the jump button as long as you want, and you'll just keep going up, and you never stop until you hit your head on the ceiling. So it takes a lot of getting used to, and it opens up a lot of weird possibilities for level design and trying to navigate your way around.
What's interesting about Major Havoc is that the game was designed with a roller controller, like the little ball or wheel.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, in addition to having to control your vertical ascent, because you don't stop on a dime when you release the jump button. You have acceleration, and so what you really do when you release the jump button is you release you stop your acceleration going up.
Yeah, you stop the force, but it takes like a couple seconds as you slow down before you start descending.
So yeah, just getting a hang of in addition to using the roller, which I've never played the game with the roller, but I'm sure it's probably easier than using an analog controller. But in addition to getting a control, a handle on using the rolling controller, or I think you can use whatever they use for Tempest, that and getting control of the jump button. I mean, you're just bumping into everything and slamming your face.
Mm-hmm. And the game punishes you for doing that too. Like if you hit your head on the ceiling, or if you slam into a wall with too much horizontal momentum, then you get stunned and you fall straight down.
Yeah, the same. The same happens on bot games. So it's also a thing they took.
Yep. And you have a lot of horizontal momentum as well that doesn't just go vertically. Like if you're going full speed over to the right and you want to turn left, it takes like a couple of seconds just to stop and turn around. And in these games, you don't have a way to fight monsters. Mm-hmm. So it all comes down to dodging and avoiding things. So you have to be very, very careful with how you control the character. So in that sense, it takes several hours of gameplay to sort of customize yourself to the controls. But I think for the three of us, controlling Kai is pretty much second nature at this point.
Yeah.
So you do reach a point where you get a feel for the acceleration and the momentum, and at that point, the game starts getting really, really fun. So in the quest of Kai, sorry, go ahead.
Mastering Kai's movement is really one of the most satisfying things in this game. Just learning each stage.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think it has a similar sort of appeal with other games that are very momentum based or very finesse based, sort of like Umihara Kawase on Super Famicom, or even Super Monkey Ball. These games have unusual controls, a lot of momentum, but you can spend a lot of time mastering them, and that mastering them feels very rewarding and very fun for speedrunning.
Yeah.
And I want to touch on another point about that a little bit later, but so the way that Kai works is you enter a level and you have to find a key somewhere on that stage, and then make your way to a door which the key opens. Very simple premise, and within each level there's different enemies that move around, and there are some items that you can pick up which have different effects. Like there's a wing item which allows you to float in the air, sort of. Like normally after you release the jump button, you can't jump again until you hit the ground, but with a wing you can just keep pressing A to float around. And generally in those wing levels, there will be spikes all over the ground, and you have to sort of float and make your way through that spike-filled area. Other items include like a candle that lets you see ghosts, or something that lets you pass through the will-o-wisps, which sort of like bounce up and down and block a path until you've gotten the item to pass through them. And one sort of weird mechanic that's in this game, which was also in Major Havoc, is that if you touch an enemy, that enemy that you hit, which kills you, will be removed from the stage until you either complete the level or until you game over. So it's pretty forgiving in that sense, that if you're really struggling with a certain section of a level, it will remove that enemy that killed you.
Interestingly, Major Havoc, you also have a shield button, which is not really present in Quest of Kai. The closest thing is like there's one level, I think, where like a lion powers you up or something, and you kind of have a shield.
Yeah, that's in more than one level, actually. Like the lion is only in the one level, but some others have that
shield.
That shield in its chest, and it basically gives you like one free hit. Because otherwise it's a one-hit death game. Yeah, so if you're just playing this casually for the first time, I mean, it's a difficult game to beat, but because it has that feature of removing enemies that you hit, you can kind of death abuse your way to the ending. But the real game starts when you're replaying it and you're trying to go for deathless runs and just constantly getting better at controlling Kai and getting faster at it as well. And I think it's kind of interesting that this game doesn't really have a huge speedrun community, although the people who do run it are like oddly, well, at least a couple of them are like very prominent runners of other games. Like George, you run Tony Hawk games a lot, and Beckerid also picked up this game, and he's a very prominent Mega Man speedrunner, and I think he also plays Gimmick and Ninja Gaiden games and other stuff.
Yeah.
So it's a game that I think appeals more to people who want to master a game and want to play it over and over until they've they can do it perfectly. So that is that.
And still the world record remains unbeaten.
Yeah.
Yeah, the world record is over 10 years old now.
But still, there weren't many. I think it was the only 18 from when I started running, and now there are, I think, four 18s.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Because you're one of them, right?
Yeah.
Like 1836 or something.
Yeah, something like that. Very close to yours.
Yeah. So this game has 60 levels in the main game, and then after that you get the ending, and following the ending and the credits you unlock 40 bonus levels, which are way harder than the main game. And I think that's kind of when Quest of Kai really starts in those bonus levels. Like everything up to that is basically tutorials in a way. Like not that they directly teach you how to play it, but you really need to know what you're doing in the bonus levels.
And you get extra enemies as Namco characters cameos, which are
That's
pretty
right.
funny.
There's monsters from Pac-Man,
Dig Dug.
and Dig Dug. I think Namco
Galaga.
from Galaga. Namco from Mappy is in there. So it's a pretty cute bunch of cameos. And you have some other like weird enemies, like the heel slime from Dragon Quest appears in one level only.
Oh yeah.
And I think Masanobu Endo or somebody
Some designer shows up in level 80. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's very cute and it has a lot of personality. And speaking of which, in between each level, well, not each level, but in between some levels, you get comments from Ishtar, another character in the Druaga series. And in the early levels, she's mostly giving you information on how to play the game, like telling you that holding down B lets you dash, or telling you about different items that you can pick up in the levels. But as you get further into the game and into the bonus levels, she starts giving you like very random comments, like giving you dating advice and telling you to buy cheesecake for your date, and just all these random things. And that's kind of something that has become a bit of a meme, at least for me. But
yeah, it really adds to the charm.
Yeah. So George, when did you start playing Quest of Kai?
I think I didn't play it until whenever I imported my Famicom. I can't even give you a time frame on when that was. But it would have to have been like at least 6 years ago, I want to say. At this point,
I guess you.
Yeah, it was at least maybe even 7 years ago now. Because I had seen the Game Center CX episodes on Quest of Kai, and was really just kind of enamored with that, and was probably the game was probably about half the reason I even imported a Famicom in the first place. That must have been at least like 7 years ago, though.
I also found out about it through Game Center CX because they spent 2 episodes on it, and then
And
also
special. Yeah.
the special, because Arino just couldn't beat the game. And I think he spent hours and hours on floor 98. The three of us have probably spent our share of time dying on that stage.
Mm-hmm. Well, I played the game for the first time in 2018. I had seen it in Game Center CX years ago, but I never really tried playing it until I saw that you like it, Mouse. So I also have a Famicom, so I imported the game. And I have a bit of an embarrassing story about my first playthrough. I couldn't really show the game footage, but on my TV and on my computer to stream it. So I only showed it on my computer, and it was kind of laggy. So it took me longer than it should have to beat. It wasn't.
This is definitely not a game you want to have input lag on.
It took me like 4 hours or something in between 2 streams to beat for the first time. And it wasn't until I got a converter that I started speedrunning it in, I think it was September of 2018. And yeah, I got really into it. I played every night.
I think I picked this up in like late 2015 or maybe 2016. And I saw it on Game Center CX. I thought it was going to be something cool to check out. And I think I played it for like 5 hours straight. Just completely lost track of time. I was so hooked by the controls and the momentum. Because for me, I love momentum in platformers. Like my favorite Mario game is Super Mario Bros. 1, because you can't turn around in the air in that game. You just have too much momentum going forward. And so the Quest of Kai was kind of like the perfect platformer for me. And I really couldn't stop playing it, and I didn't really intend to start speedrunning it when I picked it up, but as I played it more and more, that's sort of like the natural way to play that game. I mean, it times you on every level. It tells you exactly how long it took you to beat the stage. And as you adjust to the controls and you get better at maneuvering Kai through these tight spaces and around enemies and so forth, it just feels so good when you're able to do a level nonstop and you don't hit any walls, you don't hit your head, you don't touch the spikes, those nasty pixel perfect spikes.
These slanted spikes, like in Omihara was it?
Yeah.
They look very much the same.
And they're slanted like to the right, but you take one step over onto where they're supposed to be, and you die, even though your foot is at least half a tile off.
Mm-hmm.
So I think this is a game that would appeal mostly to people who like platformers where the focus is on the controls and on having very carefully maneuvering your character around, more so than, say, picking up power-ups and all those gimmicks in other games. Because it's a very straightforward sort of platformer. There's not a whole lot going on in between each stage, rather than just carefully maneuvering yourself. And this is compared to the other games that we've covered on this podcast, this is one that's very easy to pick up even without knowing any Japanese, because it's basically all gameplay. There's very little story. You don't really need to read the comments made by Ishtar in between the levels. You can just pick this up, and there's 2 buttons. You have a dash button and a jump button, and you move left and right. That's it. Very straightforward. Very easy to learn how to play, but very, very difficult to master. Desho?
Yep.
Did anyone else have any more comments or things to point out about Kai?
Well, maybe you can.
Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead. Well,
okay. The game gets kind of evil once you reach the bonus levels. So levels 1 through 60, there are some warp chests located throughout the game, which will actually kind of propel you pretty significantly through the game. You can, in the string of about 5 or 6 levels, reach level 58, and from there it's pretty simple to finish out and get the normal ending. But once you reach the bonus levels, all the warp chests actually start warping you backwards through the game. And I think like the last chest you get in the last level actually has a warp that takes you back to like what, level 1 or 2.
Yeah, on floor 100 you can go way back in the game. And that floor also has a lot of it has 6 chests just sitting around, and you can very easily pick up the wrong chest.
Yeah.
And interestingly, on floor 61, the warp sends you back to floor 61.
Yeah.
The exact same floor, and there's also a gift item on that floor which gives you 10,000 points.
So you can farm for infinite points.
You can farm infinite points, which is totally meaningless in the game, but if you want to get 1 million points, you can just grind it out on floor 61. Yeah.
The game stops giving you 1-ups after the second 1-up, though, right? After.
Yeah.
I think it only gives you 1 for points.
No, you get 2, I think.
Okay, I could be wrong, but yeah, there are a couple 1-ups that you get from points, and then the rest are just in chests. Yeah. But there are infinite continues anyway, so lives are pretty meaningless.
Yeah.
In this game.
Yeah, I remember Arino actually got that final chest, but he
reset.
Yeah, he reset. You can pass before he activates, and
yeah,
you
that was pretty funny.
Floor. Yeah, and I also wanted to mention that you mentioned power-ups, which they also can open up the possibility of doing challenges for yourself, right?
Oh yeah.
For example, if you take the poison, which trickles down time, you can challenge yourself to beat the game after taking the poison and see if you can beat the stage. So even if you master the game to a speedrun level, there are still ways to challenge your mastery of Kai, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, there are little things that you can implement on each stage by avoiding picking up chests that would make the level a lot easier, or as you mentioned, picking up a chest that actually makes it harder by reducing the amount of time that you have. And there's a bunch of weird things in certain stages. Like on floor 25, there's a whole section over to the right side, which is completely irrelevant for beating the level, but it's a very difficult section to move through. And if you get to the end, there's a mimic chest just laying there in the corner of the stage, and the only reason to go for that route is the additional challenge, because it's basically the hardest level in the game, which isn't actually a level. It's just an extra section that's hidden there. So I think that the designers really were hoping that people would replay the game and master each stage and find those little secrets and Easter eggs and bonuses that are hidden around.
It is a very tightly designed game.
Yeah, it's it's designed to be exactly what it's supposed to be. I mean, as far as controlling Major Havoc, the arcade game, I think it nails it. You don't have the exact kind of controls, but you have a run button that kind of lets you, have that feel of being out of control with out of control speed. But the game is definitely designed around it. Everything is pretty much exactly. I would say there's any bugs or anything. It's designed pretty much flawlessly. The only real bug is if you hold away from a wall. When you're stunned after hitting your head, you can clip into a wall just so you can land.
Yeah, that's only in stages that have wind physics.
That have wind, yeah.
Which is like I don't know, like maybe a dozen.
Handful, yeah.
Yeah, a handful. So like you're not gonna see it all over the place, and you can't abuse it. I think there's only 2 stages where we abuse it in the speed run. But you would think they would have found that bug when they were testing it, if they tested it. But and there are a few odd hitboxes, but like for the most part, I think it's actually really good in terms of hitboxes.
Yeah. Also, there was a mobile phone port for this at some point.
Oh yeah.
That also had some new levels, and I want to say maybe changed the controls slightly, but I mean I've never been able to play it, obviously. And that may even just be lost to time now, since it was on, whatever network it was on at the time.
iMode.
Yeah.
Coyote and I were talking in our last episode about Monster Maker, how they also had an iMode game.
Oh yeah.
And nowadays there's a lot more focus on, or a lot more interest in preserved video games, but so many of these old mobile phone games are either lost to time or they're going to be lost to time because nobody is really interested in preserving them.
Mean, and here we are, I'm sure we would love to, really dissect all the new levels that were in that, and
I think they added 100.
Yeah, it's like
100
levels.
Like it's a significant amount of content, and
right.
they also made updated graphics and sprites for everything.
Yeah.
So it looks pretty cool. You can find videos of it on YouTube or Nico Nico or like somewhere online of people playing it or at least playing part of it. Yeah.
Other than that, interesting. I don't think it's ever been re-released or anything like that or ported otherwise.
It's on the Switch, like Namco collection that I think it was earlier this year. Namco released like a number of Famicom games and NES games as a collection.
Really?
In the Japanese in the Japanese version, Quest of Kai was one of the DLC games that you could download.
Interesting.
So they did finally release it, but yeah, it never got on like the Wii Virtual Console or anything like that. And the series in general had a hard time getting released pretty much anywhere. I think Tower of Druaga and Return of Ishtar were both Japan exclusive arcade games that we didn't get overseas until the Namco collection or the Namco Museum on PS1. Blue Crystal Rod was never localized. The first game that was actually localized on release was The Nightmare of Druaga on PS2, the mystery dungeon game. So it would be nice for Namco to sort of recognize it more and
a Druaga collection or something.
Yeah, a Druaga collection would be great. I think the new Family Stadium on the Switch has an appearance from Gil and I think Ishtar as well, among other old Namco characters. So Namco is at least still aware that the series exists and people care about it. But I don't think they see it as a profitable series at this point.
Yeah, it may have had its chance in the popular popular mind, and I don't think it ever really caught on. But it
does have its fans. It does have its
Yeah,
fans, at least.
it's
Yep. So I think that just about wraps up our discussion of the Quest of Kai. George, thank you again for joining us today and
Thank
taking
you.
the time.
all right. It's been a lot of fun. Thank you.
Thank you.
So everyone who tuned in, thank you for listening.
Thanks
we'll
for
catch you
tuning
next time.
Mhm.
This has been Swan Shootout Radio. Take care.